Every Sunday at exactly 9 in the morning, he arrived, without fail. A bouquet of fresh flowers in hand, pressed shirt tucked neatly into his slacks, polished shoes tracing the same old path across the stone walkway that led to the front of the small white church. The town of Fairhollow had grown used to the sight of the quiet man with silver hair and a gentle limp sitting alone on the third bench near the hedges. He never entered the church, never spoke to the pastor or joined the congregation inside. He simply sat outside with the bouquet cradled in his lap, eyes sometimes closed, sometimes gazing at the steeple as if listening for something only he could hear. Children would sometimes pass and whisper questions to their parents. Is he sad? Was that his wife? Adults gave quiet, knowing nods, sharing in the communal assumption that he mourned a lost love, someone buried long ago, maybe nearby, maybe inside the cemetery behind the church. No one dared ask. It was easier, kinder, to let grief be silent. Some Sundays it rained. He came. Some Sundays it snowed. He came, scarf wrapped tightly, flowers protected in a plastic sheath. Some Sundays the choir sang loud enough to reach his ears. He sat still. In a town where nothing ever changed, his ritual became part of the rhythm, like church bells or street sweepers or the local paper hitting porches at dawn. People began timing their own Sundays by his presence. He's already there, they'd say, peeking through windows or walking by on the way to service. No one knew where he came from, he didn't speak much to anyone at all. The grocer said he bought carnations and lilies. The barber said he'd once asked for a cut, like in the army. The librarian recalled seeing him scan through microfilms of old newspapers, his fingers shaking as he followed the text. But that was months ago. Now, he simply appeared, always on time, always alone. One Sunday, a woman named Martha, who had just returned to Fairhollow after 15 years away, noticed the man as she walked with her daughter. "That's Mr. Gable," someone told her. "His wife died, I think. He's been doing this for years." But Martha frowned. "No," she said. "I knew Mr. Gable. That's not him." She stared longer, heart beating faster, because something about the way he sat, the way he clutched the flowers, felt disturbingly familiar. She didn't approach him that day, nor the next. Instead, she returned every Sunday for 3 weeks, pretending to walk her dog, lingering near the hedges, watching. Then, finally, she stepped close enough to see the tag on the bouquet, "For Dar, still waiting." It wasn't a name anyone in the town recognized. Not a wife. Not a mother. Not a daughter. Dar. She went home and dug through her father's boxes. He'd served in the war, just like many men from their town. In one folder, she found a photo. A blurry image of 2 young soldiers, grinning, one with a nickname scrawled underneath, Danny Ranger Holt. Her father had spoken of Ranger once, in passing, long ago, someone who never came home. Someone who'd saved his life. The next Sunday, she returned, heart heavy, photo in hand. The man was already seated. She walked up and simply said, "Was it him?" He looked at her, eyes glassy, and nodded. "I waited for years," he whispered. "They said he was gone. I knew he wasn't. I couldn't stop hoping." Martha sat down beside him, hands trembling. The town watched from a distance, puzzled by the woman's presence. She didn't speak much, only sat with him, week after week. The bouquet still came. The bench still held space for one more. The name Dr. was still written carefully, but the story, quiet and strange, had begun to open itself up. The following Sunday, Martha returned earlier than usual, the photograph now carefully placed in a protective sleeve tucked into her coat. The man was already there, sitting silently on the bench, bouquet in hand, his eyes closed in quiet reverence. She approached slowly, her boots crunching against the small gravel path, and without a word, sat beside him again. For a while, they said nothing. He seemed to know she would come back, as if her presence had been expected or perhaps even needed. Finally, she spoke. My father never stopped talking about Ranger, she said softly, keeping her eyes forward, on the steeple. The old man's lips curled slightly, not into a smile, but into something close. Neither did I, he replied, fingers tightening around the stems of the flowers. He pulled me from a burning truck, she continued. My dad always said that if it weren't for Ranger, I wouldn't be here. The man turned his head slightly, the sun catching in his watery eyes. It was in the valley, right before winter. We were ambushed. Most didn't make it, he whispered, his voice strained by memory. But Ranger, he ran back. Into the fire. Into the smoke. He carried 3 of us out. One by one. And the last time, he didn't return. Martha nodded slowly. They never found a body. Just dog tags. My father said they buried him in name only. The man's face tensed. I knew it wasn't him. I just knew. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph of his own, worn, creased, and faded nearly white with age. In the photo, 2 young men stood side by side in dusty uniforms, grinning with youth's invincibility. He promised me he'd come back. And when he didn't, I waited. Every Sunday. I told myself if I just showed up, he'd find me. Somehow. Martha looked at the picture, then at the man. Did you know he had a sister? She asked. The man shook his head. She moved away years ago, Martha said. My father kept in touch with her, barely. She told him once she always believed he was alive. That maybe he didn't die, just couldn't come back. The man leaned forward, his shoulders trembling. What if he's still out there? He asked, barely audible. What if I've been sitting here, waiting for a ghost, and he's been waiting too, somewhere? Martha didn't answer. She didn't know how. Instead, she opened her bag and took out a worn manila folder. My father kept everything, she said. Letters. Photos. Names of the men in his unit. He believed in patterns. He believed in evidence. She handed the folder to the man. Maybe there's something in here. Something that can help. The man accepted it slowly, as if it were something sacred. Why are you helping me? He asked. Martha looked down. Because if someone were waiting for my father like this, I'd want them to find him. For the next week, they met every day. The bench became a command center. The folder grew heavier with maps, articles, military documents, and satellite printouts. They made calls to old contacts, searched through digital archives, emailed veterans associations, and even filed a formal request with the Department of Defense. The man, whose name was Henry, she now learned, had an old typewriter at home, and with shaky fingers, typed a letter to the Pentagon requesting declassified documents. He didn't expect a reply. But 2 weeks later, one came. Inside the envelope was a file stamped with the words, Recovered Personnel Inquiry, 1998. There, on the 3rd page, was a note, individual matching description held in POW camp, Cambodia. Recovered 2002. Amnesia diagnosis. Transferred to VA hospital in Portland. Henry's hands trembled. Martha took the paper gently. That's him, she whispered. He was alive. They sat in silence, the world spinning differently now. Portland, Henry repeated. That's where he's been. The answer came in a second envelope 3 days later. The train ride to Portland felt like a lifetime folded into hours, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on track echoing Henry's racing thoughts, each sound another memory knocking at the door of a heart too old to forget and too stubborn to let go. Martha sat beside him, quiet and watchful, occasionally glancing at the man who had waited for decades on that wooden bench in front of a church every Sunday at 9 a.m. in silent hope. As the city unfolded before them, a mix of gray skies and hopeful morning light, Henry gripped the folder tighter, his lifeline, his proof, his confession to the world that he hadn't just been an old man chasing shadows. They arrived at the hospital just before noon. The facility was modest, tucked into a quiet suburban neighborhood, and the staff greeted them with soft voices and careful steps, as if understanding the weight of what this moment meant. A nurse led them down a corridor lined with fading murals and old war medals pinned in display cases. Room 214. Henry's hand hesitated at the knob. Martha gave him a nod. He opened the door. Inside, the man sat by the window in a wheelchair, facing the light. His hair was silver, neatly combed. His frame, though aged, carried a presence that couldn't be extinguished by time or pain. He turned slowly, and when his eyes met Henry's, there was no recognition, only the quiet curiosity of a stranger. "Can I help you?" the man asked. Henry stepped forward. "You might not remember me," he said gently, "but we were soldiers. Together. You saved my life in the valley. You dragged me from the wreckage and went back for the others. You didn't come back. I thought you were gone." The man squinted, a flicker of something crossing his brow. "The valley," he whispered, almost to himself. There was fire. Screaming. Dust. He looked down at his hands, palms trembling. "I remember pain, and then nothing. Just silence." Henry reached into his coat and pulled out the photo, the one of two young men, grinning side by side in their uniforms, dirt-smudged and sunlit. He held it out. The man stared. Then, slowly, reached for it. His fingers brushed the image, and his lips parted, breath catching like he'd stepped into a place between dream and memory. "Gable," he said. "Your name was Gable." Henry nodded, tears filling his eyes. "And you were Ranger." The silence that followed was full, deep, and sacred. No one spoke. No one dared. A memory reawakened is not a moment, it is a lifetime reclaiming itself. The man held the photo close, clutching it like a lifeline. "I didn't think anyone remembered me," he said. Henry smiled, broken and whole all at once. "I never stopped." They sat together for hours, unwrapping years in slow, careful words. The hospital gave them space. Martha stepped outside, leaving them with time they'd earned 1,000 times over. By evening, the two men sat side by side at the window, watching the sunset bleed across the cityscape. "They said you didn't have family," Henry murmured. "I don't," the man replied. "Not anymore." Henry placed a hand on his shoulder. "You do now." In the following weeks, arrangements were made. Ranger, whose real name was James Mercer, was moved to a smaller facility near Henry's home. Martha visited often, helping reconnect the dots of a man's forgotten life, bringing newspapers, music, stories from old comrades who had long thought him dead. The church bench remained. But now, every Sunday at 9 a.m., it wasn't just one man sitting there with flowers, it was two. And though the second man didn't always remember why he was there, he felt safe beside Henry, felt something familiar in the way the sun hit the steeple, in the way Henry's hand rested calmly on his knee. On the anniversary of the battle in the valley, they returned to the memorial wall together. James traced his own name etched among the fallen, a ghost who'd outlived his own shadow. They laughed at the absurdity. They cried at the truth. Henry wrote a letter to the Department of Veterans Affairs, requesting the correction of records. "He's not a ghost," he wrote. "He's a survivor. And he deserves to be known." Months passed. Life didn't return to normal, it created something new. A shared home. Morning coffee. Late-night radio. James regained more fragments of memory, enough to smile when Henry retold the same story for the third time, enough to call him brother again. And every Sunday at 9 a.m., they sat in front of the church, not waiting anymore, but remembering. Two soldiers. Two lives intertwined. Proof that even when time forgets, the heart remembers. That hope, no matter how quiet or how long, still arrives, exactly when it's needed most.